on MSNBC, Martin Bashir talking with Julian Epstein. And this is how Martin Bashir started this. I'm not going to play the clip, but I'll just share the transcript here. A father's grief interrupted by the cries of a heckler. That was the scene in Hartford, Connecticut, where the parents of children killed at San Diego Elementary testified before an audience that wasn't always friendly. Neil Heslin talked about the loss of his 6-year-old son, Jesse, who was shot and killed while urging his classmates to run. In Washington, the president and vice president met at the White House with law enforcement officials from towns that have been scarred by gun violence. Let's bring in Steve Kornacki, my colleague here at MSNBC, and Democratic strategist Julian Epstein. I want to put this question to both of you if I can. Steve, these gun lobbyists are fairly aggressive. They drag the president's children into the debate with that scurrilous advert, but the heckling of a father of a child who is lost, can you explain that to me? Steve Kornacki says, well, if you look at the outpouring of grief for these families, one thing that separated the aftermath of Newtown is this story that stayed in the news. It stayed in the news a lot longer. When you look at a moment like that, which obviously it's indefensible for somebody to show up at a hearing and treat a man like that, but I think it adds to the momentum of gun control. It adds to the outrage, and it adds to the case for action to be taken here. Keep in mind, this didn't happen. They selectively edited this footage, and here you have Martin Bashir, Steve Kornacki, his colleague at MSNBC. What? I don't watch MSNBC, Cameron. Is Kornacki a reporter? Or is he an anchor? You don't watch MSNBC either.
I don't watch it either, Cam. Sorry.
Okay, can you look him up for me? Because listen to this. I mean, listen to the words of Steve Kornacki. This adds to the outrage, and it adds to the case for action to be taken here. Martin Bashir then says, Julian, you heard that father, Wayne LaPierre of the NRA, will be going to the White House, to the Senate Judiciary Committee this week. What do you think of the reaction of these lobbyists to a father whose child's been murdered? Now, again, even if this video was not deceptively edited, this wasn't a lobbyist, this was a dude in the room. But regardless of that, Epstein says, well, even aside the fact that the hecklers have no idea what they're talking about in the sense that the Second Amendment in no way restricts the outline of assault weapons. What? Who appointed you, Chief Justice, Julian? This has to be a new low in the debate, he says. The idea that you would desecrate the memory of the victims of Newtown and insult their families, this shows just, I think, how extreme and outrageous the NRA, and I assume the hecklers were NRA moles, how they've become. That's how this was presented, that there was heckling going on. Now, we've got the actual footage of the actual hearing in this moment that they were referring to. Yeah, who's Kornacki?
According to Steve Kornacki's Twitter bio, he writes about politics for Salon, co-hosts MSNBC's The Cycle, and he does his best to stay hydrated. Oh, he's so funny.
All right. Why don't you try your best to be honest for a day, Steve? Don't worry so much about the water. Hey, you know what, Steve? Here's the thing. Do a week's worth of honest reporting. I will buy you Fiji water for a month. Steve Kornacki of MSNBC, I'm calling you out. Do a week's worth of honest reporting and I'll buy your damn water for a month. A big bottle every day. Is this enough to keep you hydrated, Steve? All I ask is that when you do your reporting, when you do your opining, when you see something that has been deceptively edited, maybe you say, whoa, Martin, what are you doing? We shouldn't be doing this. That's not how this went down. Let's show you what actually happened in Connecticut yesterday.
You know, I wish I asked if there's anybody in this room that can give me one reason or challenge this question, why anybody in this room needs to have one of these assault-style weapons or military weapons or high-capacity clips. And now one person can answer that question or give me any.
Section Amendment shall not be infringed.
All right.
Please, no comments while Mr. Heslin is speaking.
Okay. All right, let's stop. Neil Heslin asked a question. He asked a question of those in the room. Nobody responded. Everybody was silent. Everybody was respectful. And then this father said, nobody can tell me. And that's when you heard people say, you heard and you heard one guy in the back say, shall not be infringed. Now, Martin Bashir may not find that to be an acceptable response. I'm guessing Neil Heslin doesn't. But that's not the point. The point is that this didn't happen the way they said it happened. This wasn't heckling. This was a question directed to people in the room by the person testifying. When there was not a response, the individual testifying pointed out the lack of a response. And then there was a response. And then the committee chairman said, well, hey, no responding, you'll clear the room. Am I wrong in thinking here, Cameron, that if they had played this footage like we just did without making any sort of edit? Oh, and by the way, if we can, Danny, I realize I'm throwing this at you last second here, but I'm going to send you the clip from MSNBC. If we can even get the audio of this, because I want you at home to hear how MSNBC edited this clip, edited this footage to make it appear as if there was heckling. When a question is asked of people in the room, and the question was, can anybody in this room tell me? I don't believe I'm off base in saying that a response is heckling, when a response was actually asked for by the individual testifying. When none was forthcoming, the individual testifying, Neil Heslin, the father of a child murdered at Sandy Hook Elementary, said, nobody can tell me. And that is when you heard from a few of the folks who had gathered in that room. And by the way, I didn't hear heckling. I heard a response to the question that this father had asked. I'll say it again. This is the time when gun control advocates, whether they are politicians, whether they are media figures, whether they run gun control groups, this is the time when they should be bringing their A game. They tell us that the American people agree with them. They tell us that NRA members agree with them. And yet when it comes time to make their case, we don't hear about what will actually happen in terms of public safety if these gun control laws are passed. We have Dianne Feinstein making the rather grand and unsubstantiated claim that, of course, the last quote-unquote assault weapons ban was effective in saving lives. No study has shown that. As a matter of fact, the studies that were done after the expiration of the ban said, I really can't say that the ban did much of anything. All right, we're going to have the video of this in 1 second, and I want you to see this. It's important that you see this. I take no joy or glee in pointing this out. Frankly, this concerns me. It concerns me that we have a media entertainment industrial complex that has decided to hell with journalism, to hell with reporting. We're here to drum up support for gun control. Now, at MSNBC, I'm guessing that a majority of their audience is largely supportive of gun control already. So I don't think they're trying to change anybody's mind about gun control by deceptively editing this clip. What they are trying to do is gin up outrage and direct that outrage towards the NRA and its members and gun owners in general. And they are doing this by presenting a version of what happened yesterday that didn't really happen. I don't know what the excuse will be. I don't know if they'll even bother coming up with an excuse. But I know that this wasn't edited for time constraints. That little soundbite we shared with you, the whole thing was 40 seconds. So if they edited this, when they made the edit, they did so for reasons other than brevity or trying to make the segment a reasonable length of time. It is my belief that the only reason that they did this was to try to make gun owners, to try to make the NRA and its members look badly, to try to make it appear as if gun owners care more about their firearms than their kids, to try to make it appear as if gun owners care more about their firearms than this grieving father, and that they would not even allow this grieving father to testify without interrupting him, when in fact this grieving father asked those gun owners in the room a question. When they did not reply, when there was silence, he then brought up their silence as if, there must not be a reason. All right, so let's share with you. We share with you the original, what actually happened. Now let's check out how MSNBC covered it.
Why anybody in this room needs to have one of these assault-style weapons or military weapons.
Second Amendment shall not be infringed.
Jiminy Christmas.
All right?
Please, no comments while Mr. Heslin is speaking, or we'll clear the room.
That is egregious. I mean, that is as egregious an edit as you could possibly get. There was no reason to make that edit. They saved 20 seconds and completely changed what happened. They took out 20 seconds of that video, and all of a sudden the story became something that did not occur. And again, let's go back to what Martin Bashir said. He says, a father's grief interrupted by the cries of a heckler. Let's bring in Steve Kornacki, the well-hydrated co-host of The Cycle. If you look at the outpouring of grief for these families, Steve Kornacki said, one thing that separated the aftermath of Newtown is this story has stayed in the news. It stayed in the news a lot longer than other shootings, and it's kept gun control in the news a lot longer, which has created this political opening. When you look at a moment like that, which obviously it's indefensible for somebody to show up at a hearing and treat a man like that, but I think it adds to the momentum, it adds to the outrage, and it adds to the case for action to be taken here. Steve Kornacki, how does it feel to be such a hack that NRA News is actually producing better journalism than you? I mean, really, I cannot wait for S.E. Cupp to talk to you about this on The Cycle. Is it you really, Steve? You've got to speak out about this. You've got to say something about this. This is if you didn't know what the original piece looked like, if you weren't responsible for that edit, you go on, you were blindsided by Martin Bashir, you've got an obligation as a professional, Steve, to say, Martin, what you guys did here was wrong. You put me in a bad spot. You gave me false information and wanted me to respond and react to something that didn't actually happen. If that's what happened, Steve, you owe it to yourself to speak up. If you knew, however, what had happened and you went along with it because, again, you're more interested in making gun owners look bad and trying to add to the outrage and add to the case for action. Think about what Steve Kornacki said. When you look at a moment like that, a moment, by the way, that was manufactured by MSNBC, let's paraphrase Steve Kornacki. When you look at a moment like this, manufactured by MSNBC, which obviously it's indefensible for somebody to show up at a hearing and treat a man like that, but that didn't really happen because instead the man asked the audience a question, they were respectful, and then when he said, see, nobody can answer, that's when the answer came. When you manufacture a news story like this, I think it adds to the momentum. It adds to the outrage, and it adds to the case for action to be taken here under false pretenses. Such is the state of journalism in this country right now. Such is the state of the mainstream media when it comes to reporting on Second Amendment news and information. So I'm going to do something I never, ever, ever do on this program. If you watch on a regular basis, you know that I never do this. I'm going to ask you to tell everybody you know who cares about this issue, who is following the gun control debate, whether they're gun owners or not. I'm going to ask every one of you to tell every one of them that we're here. Because I can assure you, I know we have gun control advocates who will tune into this program. I want them to be served as well. I want them to get information and news that they're not going to get anywhere else. Again, sadly, it is a real low bar to clear these days. But there is an alternative. There is a place where you will get what really happens. Not on MSNBC, but here on NRA News.